In this video, we'll cover an approach to Apricot role design. Even when you fully understand how to use all the on-off switches available for role permissions in the Apricot account management app, where do you even begin? How do you decide how many and which roles to create? The particular approach that you take will likely be impacted by a few variables specific to your organization and your particular role. There's two important considerations. First, what are the data confidentiality needs of your organization? And also, what's your personal bandwidth as an administrator? So at your organization, do you need high control? Does your org manage a lot of sensitive client data, which needs to be really tightly controlled? Or at your org, instead, are there looser restrictions where there's actual value in most staff having access to most client data? It's a big spectrum between high control with minimal visibility or high transparency with minimal walls. It's also impacted by your personal bandwidth as an administrator. Are you a full-time admin? Is that your primary role? Or are your administrative duties an add-on to your already full-time job? The amount of time that you have to give to your administrative duties will really impact how detailed you're going to make your access roles. And also, what's your personal approach? Do you prefer to give access to a lot and then only take away if it causes issues? Or are you more cautious and you start with only essential access, but then open it up when requested? A lot of variables. Another thing I find really helpful as far as mindset when approaching role design is to think about what a role needs, not an individual. Typically, when someone comes to you asking for access in Apricot, they're going to be asking for access for a specific person. But really, as an administrator, you need to translate that to what their role needs. So when that role logs in, what do they need to see in order to perform their job? And a couple related tips for naming conventions. So your naming conventions for your permission sets should be specific. The name you give should give enough information about the permission set to understand what it refers to without having to open the permission set. They should also be clear. Anyone should be able to understand the naming system. And consistent. Find a naming system that will work across all the roles and then maintain that criteria. So for example, maybe your naming convention is program name plus role name. So for example, program A home visitor would be the name of your role. All right, so I personally find it helpful to start with a visual with an org chart. So either review an existing one or sketch out a chart with the roles of your org, but you really only need to focus on the roles which need access to Apricot. So in this sample organization, we have an executive director and 3 programs. In program A, there's a program manager, a program coordinator, and 2 front desk staff. Program B has a program manager with 4 home visitors. Program C, very similar to program B, but smaller, with a program manager and 2 home visitors. And then this organization also has a grants manager who interacts with data in Apricot on a regular basis. Okay, great. So this org chart serves as a visual checklist of the roles which rely on Apricot. So next, think about the data-related duties which each role performs. What processes do they lead or participate in? We find that data-related responsibilities essentially boil down to 3 categories. Either you're putting data in, you're reviewing entered data, doing some sort of quality assurance, or you're getting data out. So within those, sometimes there's some additional splits, getting data in, doing data entry. Sometimes that's split up. Different people will do intake data entry versus direct client service data entry. Sometimes those are combined. Another potential split might be in getting the data out. Sometimes when you're getting data out, when you're answering questions for your organization, you're focused just on a single program. But sometimes other roles are focused across the organization, looking more in aggregate and looking across the org. So now organize the roles from your org chart into this matrix. Think about each role individually and where do they fit based on their responsibilities and their interactions with data. So let's start with program A. In program A, the role responsible for doing intake data entry is the front desk staff. But after client intake, data entry switches over to the program coordinator, who's doing data entry for direct client services. That program coordinator is also responsible for reviewing the data, for coordinating and making sure all the data is getting in and is timely and thorough. The program manager is responsible for getting data out, so answering questions on behalf of the program, doing both internal and funder reporting. In program B, the home visitor is responsible for all data entry, both intake and direct client service, whereas the program manager is going to be reviewing that data and then also doing the funder and internal reporting for program B. And at this org, program C is set up very similarly and mirrors program B. So now we've got most of the roles plotted except for executive director and grants manager. They both are looking across the organization. So they're looking for data to answer questions about the whole entire organization, looking at demographics, services provided for the organization as a whole. Okay, great. So we've got all the roles plotted. Now what? I find this to be a helpful tool in mapping out how many and which roles are needed. So from here, there's a few different approaches based on your org's needs and your administrative bandwidth. One approach is to create roles based on the tasks listed in the left column. So the role name might be direct client service data entry. Another role name might be data review. And so in program A, the program coordinator would actually get two roles because they perform both direct client service data entry and reviewing of that data. Another approach is to create roles based on the columns, on the programs. So in this example, there might be a role called program A program coordinator, which includes all the access needed to perform duties for both direct client service data entry and reviewing the data. So perhaps this is unsatisfying because it's an approach and not really a step-by-step, but hopefully this gives you some tools to get your thoughts and ideas organized and more confidently approach Apricot role design.